Puerto Rico, where I'm from, is becoming an increasingly popular place to move among wealthy Americans. That's because of laws that provide them with significant tax breaks. The island passed several laws in 2012 that are now known as Act 60. The move was promoted as something to incentivize investors to move into the U.S. territory in order to generate revenue and boost the economy. Critics say this will lead to increasing gentrification, and they want the Puerto Rican government to act. This is something that we covered extensively on our CBS News documentary, Fighting for Paradise, and that Bianca Graulau, who's an independent journalist based in Puerto Rico, covering Puerto Rico on several platforms, has also been covering extensively. Bianca, first of all, welcome. It's so good to see you. Love your work, love what you're doing from the island independently. What kind of tax savings are people moving to Puerto Rico being offered? Can you tell me a little bit of what you've uncovered?
Hi, Lilia. So these are very attractive tax incentives. We're talking zero capital gains tax. This means that for people who have high income, high earners, for long-term or short-term capital gains, they could be looking at 37% in most states. In Puerto Rico, they don't pay anything. So as you can imagine, that's a very attractive offer for people who are looking to save money on tax.
And a lot of them are certainly using this. I mentioned this plan was initially meant, or at least promoted, to create more revenue for the island. How much, in terms of the economy, how much of a benefit has Puerto Rico seen so far?
That's a good question. So far, what we know is that there's one study from the government that I looked into. And the reality is that that is a contested sort of study. On the one hand, you have the government saying this is moving our economy, this is bringing capital to Puerto Rico. But we do know that it is not creating the jobs that were expected, that were supposed to come with this tax benefit. So the government is facing pressure to look at these tax benefits again and see if suppose what they're saying are the benefits are really outweighing the potential negative effects.
And it seems, I've been reading from the Center for Investigative Journalism in Puerto Rico, too, that, they're looking at just issues with accounting. They don't even, nobody's really keeping a good accounting of who owes, who pays what. But, one of the sore points is that a majority of Puerto Ricans aren't actually eligible to take advantage of this. Why is that? Tell me how it's all structured to keep Puerto Ricans out of it.
So the way the legislation was written, it is only for people who move to Puerto Rico. If you're a Puerto Rican who has already been living in Puerto Rico, you're not eligible for that tax break. So we know that there are conditions in Puerto Rico that already create inequality between people living in Puerto Rico and people living in the States. You add to that a tax benefit that Puerto Ricans living here are not eligible for, and that deepens that inequality.
Some of your reporting, Bianca, that I've seen on YouTube and elsewhere, from TikTok to Instagram, a lot of people are sharing, talks about, one of the major concerns that these laws could bring, and that is the displacement of native Puerto Ricans from the island. Tell me what you've encountered, some of the stories that you've heard from the ground.
Yeah, like I said, so because that inequality is such a concern, you have the same factors that we're seeing in the U.S., increased housing costs, inflation. And on top of that, you have those inequalities. What you're seeing is that Puerto Ricans are having a hard time affording a place to live. So then when you invite people with a lot of buying power to Puerto Rico, then you see a situation where locals cannot compete with that.
How close is the local legislature, or how do opponents of Act 60 want the government to respond to that situation? What is the solution that people want to see, and how close is it to ending, at least with Act 22, which is, I guess, the one that attracts so many people to actually move to the island?
So there are different opinions. You have people who just want it outright repealed. There are people who want it amended so that it does apply to the local population. Some people want to at least charge something in terms of capital gains tax to the people who have been moving here. So there is legislation for those different purposes and goals. It'll be a question about what the local legislature is going to do in this next session and whether they're actually going to change the law in any way.
Well, it seems like there's been increased pressure. I've been following that some people are protesting. A lot of people are kind of getting more educated on the topic. So we'll be following up and see where this all leads. Bianca, thank you so much for your coverage and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.